Hey, what's up, fellow Tenno? This is Tolerant here talking about Oxium, and this will be actually my very first resource guide for the game, as I want to help newer players farm up resources that are a little bit more difficult to get, or that you require so much of that you need to really optimize to enjoy what you're doing. Oxium is a ridiculous resource in this game that requires you to kill only a single enemy that spawns with only a single faction, and only drops about 10. This is, of course, excluding all types of boosters, Desecrate Necros, Pilfering Hydroid, Pilfering Korra, Smita Kavat. But in this guide, I will explain exactly the methods that I used, exactly what I did to get these results, and all of the stuff that you get other than Oxium, which I think is also important, especially for newer players. Jupiter on Io has been the best Oxium farm for a long time. Everyone knows that. It is even mentioned in the wiki for Oxium that Io is one of the best places to farm for Oxium. There are other methods that are suggested by other people, but Oxium farming on Io has been such a staple that it was even nerfed at one point, but still remains very, very viable. I absolutely hate the Corpus, and I absolutely hate spending time on the Io, as I've spent many hours on Io farming Oxium. So I wanted to find a new way to farm Oxium that no one had ever really attempted before. And I saw a gleam of hope the other day whenever I was doing a sortie mission. It was a disruption on La Media, I think is how you say it. I probably butchered it. We're going to call it Lao for the rest of this video. This mission was a second level sortie mission on Lao, which is a disruption mission on the Corpus ship tile set. This mission was rough because of all of the modifiers that the Corpus had and getting nullified constantly. But once we finished it, I noticed that we had a lot of Oxium. I mean a lot of Oxium. 400 plus just with my resource booster from maybe about 15 minutes in there. So I started to think, if this place could beat out Io, then we would finally have a place we could farm that is far more engaging, has better other drops as well, and that we can enjoy the farm. So I set about to make it my goal to find out if this place was better than Io on Jupiter, and you'll have to watch to the end of the video to see the results, as I actually have a Google spreadsheet with all of the results that I have. Disruption missions are an endless type mission that were introduced in update 25.0 that tasks the Tenno with recovering items from conduits that have security systems set up by Alid V. This is very similar to a mobile defense, except you only have to care about a single enemy destroying it. This enemy is referred to as a demo unit. Very quick to call out on comms. This is easily done solo or with teammates. There is some research that indicates that more Oxium Ospreys can spawn if there are more teammates. This is a solo farming guide, so you don't have to worry about any of that. And you won't have to worry about having like an insanely optimized setup because it's just you. During a disruption mission, you will be killing enemies to obtain these keys that you plug into conduits, and then you kill the demo unit. Very simple. They can be done insanely fast. Why I thought this was the best is I started to notice a bunch of Ospreys spawning during our sortie mission. As it turns out, this is actually talked about in the Oxium wiki, where it states sorties seem to have somewhat higher spawn rates for the Ospreys. That is the only mention it has. Just this disruption mission I thought might be special. So I set about with a process, and I started with all of the disruption missions that were Corpus. And that is only 3, but it was a very quick process. Lao on Neptune, Ganymede on Jupiter, and Apollo on Lua. Now, I did do the process quite thoroughly on Ganymede and on Apollo, but I fell off on quite a few of the other missions because the yields were so low that it was obvious that they were not going to beat out Io. On Apollo and Ganymede, both of them have special units that spawn or special protocols that happen that cause Oxium Ospreys to be a more rare enemy type. And for those reasons, those 2 disruption missions were kind of abandoned very early on. Ganymede especially was the worst, as it would spawn the amalgamations or the amalgams far more often than it would spawn an Oxium Osprey, making it an extremely bad choice. Apollo, on the other hand, is a decent enough choice, but Lao is better for reasons that will be stated later. Process I set about using was 20 minutes in, no boosts, normal frame, no Smita Kavat, go about it. See how much I get. And that is my baseline for a player who does not have a farming frame like Necros, Hydroid, or Korra, who doesn't have a Smita Kavat, and who doesn't have a resource boost going. Because I want this to be as accessible to new players as possible. And I know that this is kind of deep in the system, being on Uranus, or being on, I know this is kind of deep in the system, being on Neptune, but getting through the star chart should be one of the first things a new player should focus on. And I will be keeping that in mind, that this new player has just been focusing on the star chart and has progressed and has begun now farming bosses and requiring Oxium for multiple weapons and warframes. That is the assumption we will be taking further. So these were broken down into 20-minute missions spent across Lao, Io, and many other ones. Capture missions on high and low level enemies, survival missions on high and low enemies, and mobile defense missions on high and low enemies. I will put in a little footnote saying that I did attempt Outer Terminus and found it to be extremely bad. People were swearing by Outer Terminus, saying it was far better than Io on Jupiter. I went for 20 minutes on that and got the exact same yield that I got from Io, but facing enemies that were double the level. So it was not exactly a good idea, especially if it's a newer player. I can in good faith tell them to go to a place that I saw no discernible difference from, and you're only facing higher level enemies. During this process, a lot of missions were weeded out immediately. Like I said, the other two Corpus Disruption missions were weeded out immediately for being extremely bad. There were survival missions that I tried that on both Pluto and Jupiter that were weeded out immediately. Capture missions, where I would find the target, cap them, and then try and just kill, were really bad. Somebody suggested that I attempt doing a mobile defense, where I completed all 3 of the terminals and waited around to kill everything that spawned. That was also extremely bad. It stopped the spawns very soon. I tried again doing the first 2, or doing the first one. I tried a third one where I did the first one and then waited, and it once again just started to stop spawning enemies. It did have a strong start where on 1 or 2 of them, I had 3 or 4 Ospreys spawn at the first defense, but it would quickly just fizzle out, and then, of course, the enemies would stop spawning, making it to where mobile defenses were also knocked out. I will state this, that I did not try, somebody suggested a low-level sabotage, where I continuously dealt with enemies and just kept on fighting them. I did not attempt this, and there is also a method that you use, the Earth Bounties. The Earth Bounties you can get on Cetus to attempt and get it as well, but I did not attempt those. We might do a part 2, especially if we have some more user suggestions in the comments of these videos. Like I said, Lao and Io stood out far above the rest by large margins, and I decided to set about doing 3 runs solo, absolutely no resource boosts, no pilfering strangledomes, no pilfering storms, no desecration necroses, no Smita Kavats, nothing. Just running it through as I could. 3 times, 20 minutes on Lao, 3 times 20 minutes on Io, and extracting, of course, there was some minute differences because of extraction times and stuff like that, but very consistent. And I wanted to do it 3 times to develop an average and not just have a good run or a bad run and go with the good one and then go with the bad one for the other one. With that said, the next 3 runs on each were done with a Desecration Necros, a resource booster, a resource drop chance, which doesn't affect Ospreys, and they were done with a Smita Kavat as well. These I recorded as is, resource booster included, all of it. And these are my findings. As you can see on the chart, we had on the solos for Lao, we had 80, 87, and 80 with an average of 82 per 20-minute wave. This was some of the first ones I did. I might want to revisit this in the future because this was just starting out and I found more optimal ways to do it later. But this is what we're looking at right now. On Io, the numbers speak. 130, 154, 126, averaging 136 per run. This was also done with frames that with things that didn't even need leveled up. I did the very first one as fast as possible to discover that about 20 waves is about 20 minutes, and then I took it far more casually with the rest, always extracting at 20 waves so that it would not change the data. And as you can see, it's just superior. Now, the solo perfects were interesting. I had a lot of bad runs on Lao that I can definitely attribute to myself, extreme user error, but Lao is a lot harder than Io. It is not as much of a turn off your brain and farm as Io is, which Io is, I hate Io because of that. You can see one of my runs in particular reach the 400s. This I think was a god run, honestly, in Lao. There were Ospreys everywhere. My Desecrates were hitting whenever I needed them to. I don't think that that's the average. I think as well the 240 that's calculated in isn't exactly the best either. It was a very suboptimal run that I think I can exclusively blame on myself, and I really didn't even want to include it as a data point, but I didn't have time to rerun it. Seeing all of this, the IO perfect runs were ridiculous. Never below 400, sometimes almost 500. And all of these, I still missed Ospreys every once in a while because of them spawning behind me and just suiciding into me. But even with that said, the numbers are at 400 plus every single time, 420 minutes. It was boring and sad, as you can see. I was almost falling asleep at my station, just sitting there trying to grind out IO. It was by far the most boring experience fighting such low-level enemies, and the only times it was not boring, it was tedious, because they can damage the thing to a ridiculous degree and can't even scratch you, making it to where it's just you trying to juggle the health of the cryopod. Lao did not have that problem. It had these higher numbers with what was about a 25% or a slightly higher loss in efficiency, but like I said earlier, there are some benefits. IO gives you virtually nothing else. You get Oxium. It's not good for leveling. It's not good for any other farm. It's not good for credits, period. Lao, on the other hand, gave us, with a credit booster, 230,000 credits every single run, meaning 115,000 credits without a booster every 20 minutes, while also getting that much Oxium. And if you were not to get the credits, you would be getting universal medallions, which is an insanely good resource that you could utilize to do conclave, you could utilize to do whatever syndicate you don't feel like leveling up. This is amazing. I think this is by far the only determining factor that I brought in as to why I won't be using IO any longer. I no longer have to go credit farming. I no longer have to sit on IO and just bore myself to tears farming Oxium. I will take the roughly 25% loss in efficiency to gain a very sustainable credit farm and universal medallion farm as well. I hope that all of you will see this as well and maybe not use IO as much, but what I actually want to come from this video is for both newer players to see this and understand that there are resources out there that can help you find places to farm and places that can make the farm a lot more fun, such as Lao instead of IO. Or if you want just cold efficiency, you could just go to IO. And then you could put on some anime, put on some YouTube, put on a movie, something like that, and just sit around on IO and do that. With that said, I want you in the comments to let me know what you use to farm Oxium. I had some user suggestions during stream when I was testing these things over at twitch.tv/toleranttv, but I want more user suggestions. I want people to tell me all their different kinds of Oxium farms. Maybe there's a diamond in the rough that I didn't see. Maybe you guys can help me find an even better farm that we can use as the community so we don't have to use IO constantly. Make sure you like, subscribe, check out my other videos, which will be coming soon. I plan on doing resource guides. I plan on doing guides around complex topics, making them far more easy to understand and more welcoming to newer players. I play on Xbox. If you need a clan that you want to join, I'm always willing to help newer players, and you can come over to my stream, say hi, ask for some help, and 9 times out of 10, if it's something I can help you with, I will help you with it. So this has been great talking to you guys. I hope to see all of you soon, and goodbye.